All right, welcome. I'm going to get started since we are at 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern, which was the start time for this conversation series. Thank you all for joining us wherever you are in the United States or North America, across the world. This is the second conversation series that the ICA Health Communication Division has organized for this spring. And as you can tell from the title slide, in this conversation, we are going to focus on life after tenure. Yes, there is still life after tenure. I'm evidence of that, or panelists are evidence of that. And we'll talk about how to navigate that landscape. Um, I want to start by saying that this conversation is being recorded. We will share the recording on social media for folks who are in other parts of the world who weren't able to join us, or folks who are just tied up with other things. If you are, however, uncomfortable with recording, or you prefer to not have your video on, feel free to to kind of disable your video, but we would love to see as many folks as possible, just so that this feels like a real conversation. um I I'd like to just say a little bit about what ICA Conversation Series means for those of you who may not be familiar with this particular, I guess this particular opportunity that ICA provides. So the Health Communication Division basically launched this conversation series to basically provide an avenue for scholars, all types of scholars, early career, mid-career, late career, to basically talk about things that there may not be space or like places in other parts of the academy to talk about. Everything from career development, publication. We had a series about a month ago on like how do you build interdisciplinary grant teams. So just various topics that kind of come up in the course of our lives, but we don't really have a place to discuss it. I do want to say I would be remiss if I did not thank the outstanding planning committee that helped plan this year's conversation series, both the one in March and the one we are doing now. And they include Doctors Jingbo Meng, Fang Sao Lu, Nareen Yegian, Soo-jung Kim, Luna Wu, and doctoral candidate, I believe, Ernest Ishun. So wherever you are, whether you're on Zoom or wherever you are in the world, a huge thank you to all of you. This wouldn't have been possible without this committee. Um, we have an absolutely outstanding panel of speakers today who were kind enough to, volunteer their time to participate in this conversation. And I'd like to just provide a brief background on each of them, and just in case you're not familiar with their work. So Dr. Jennifer Kam joins us from UC Santa Barbara, where she is professor and vice chair in the Department of Communication. She's also affiliated with the Chicano Studies Institute and the Migration Initiative at UCSB. Her research examines how stressors rooted in structural barriers are associated with the health and well-being of immigrant youth and their families. And she has received numerous awards from the National Communication Association for her research and service, such as the Early Career Award from the Interpersonal Communication Division and the Promoting Diversity and Inclusion Award from the HealthCom Division. And most recently, she received a presidential citation from the National Communication Association for her efforts to make the discipline more community and culturally centered. So grateful you're here with us. Thank you so much. Dr. C.J. Lee is joining us from another part of the world, particularly Seoul. He's at Seoul National University, where he's professor in the Department of Communication, but he's also served as department chair and graduate studies director. Before Seoul National University, he was at Ohio State, specifically the Columbus campus, and also at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where he was an assistant professor. His work focuses on the interplay between communication and the social determinants of health. His work has been widely funded by the NIH, the National Research Foundation of Korea, and the Ministry of Science of the Republic of Korea. He's also a co-editor-in-chief of the Journal of Communication and also serves on the editorial boards of most of the top outlets in the fields of communication and public health. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. Just out of curiosity, what time is it where you are?
It's 11 p.m.
Oh, goodness. Is it well past your bedtime?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hopefully this conversation is exciting enough that you don't want to, yeah, you won't fall asleep, but we will make sure that doesn't happen. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Nehama Lewis is at the University of Haifa, where she is an associate professor in the Department of Communication. Um, she's also serving as the vice chair of the ICA Health Communication Division, so you might have seen her name on correspondence you received from ICA. Currently, however, she's not at Haifa. She is on the west coast of this country at San Diego State University, where she's a visiting professor. Her research, like a lot of our analysts, focuses on health communication, media effects, persuasion, and design and evaluation of strategic communication campaigns. She has served as an elected board member of the Marie Curie Alumni Association and has received funding for her research from the European Union and Israel's insurance company's research fund. Thank you so much for being awake at 7 a.m., Dr. Lewis. Very, very much
No
appreciate.
problem.
Dr. Meghan Moran joins us from the East Coast. She is an associate professor in the Department of Health, Behavior, and Society at Johns Hopkins University in the Bloomberg School of Public Health. And her work focuses on understanding the ways in which media affect health outcomes and can be used to promote public health. She has several active projects studying tobacco marketing, including work focusing on e-cigarettes, cigarettes, and oral nicotine pouches. She also studies risk communication, focuses on vaccine hesitancy, vaccine uptake, and other areas of her work have looked at entertainment media and communication-based interventions to reduce health disparities, particularly in the area of cancer screening. And her work has also been funded by an array of organizations, including the NIH, the FDA, and the Burroughs Wellcome Fund. Thank you so much for being here. And then last but absolutely not the least is Dr. Jeff Niederdeppe, who joins us from Cornell, where he is the Liberty Hyde Bailey Professor of Communication in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, as well as the Senior Associate Dean of Faculty Development in the Jebby Brooks School of Public Policy. His research examines the processes and effects of mass media campaigns, strategic messages, and news coverage in shaping health behavior and social policy. And his work has been funded again by an array of organizations like the NIH, the NSF, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. He's also received a slew of awards, including being elected as Fellow of ICA, the Early Career Award from the American Public Health Association, and the Lewis Donahue Outstanding Scholar in HealthCom from the Kentucky Conference on HealthCom. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being here. Before I jump into my questions, I'd just like to give you just a general sense of the topics we'll be talking about today. So we'll try to cover um, a range of topics, everything from, what is the experience of like getting tenure like, and also we have people on the panel from institutions where tenure is defined differently. So we also hope that that will add kind of some diverse perspectives to the conversation. So we'll talk about institutional support, and then we'll end with with some advice, best practices that our panelists have for all of you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen just so that we can kind of see each other better. Um, and kind of jump into my first question, which is for any panelist. So, um, the process of tenure, it is an intense period of time. It's a demanding time. So I'd like to ask the panelists, what was that experience like, if you can reflect on it? And then, given that tenure is demanding in so many ways, intellectually, physically, emotionally, spiritually, what did it feel like to finally, yeah, be at that mountaintop? You plant your flag, you're like, I am here. Like, did it feel that way? Or did it feel like, yeah, where's my flag? So yeah, just broad question to just get us started, and anyone can start.
I guess I can
Go ahead.
start.
So this is such a great question, and thank you everyone for taking the time to be here today. And of course, each one of us, has our own unique experiences. So when I talk about my own, I definitely, know that everyone needs to probably have conversations with people at their institutions and in their specific areas of, interest with health communication. So, but my particular journey, I earned my PhD in 2009, so about 16 years ago, and pre-tenure, I think the first job that I had was as an assistant professor at the Ohio State University. And I was there for 2 years. And then I moved and became, and I was an assistant professor at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign for 3 years. And then I came to the University of California, Santa Barbara after that and was an assistant professor there. So I definitely moved around pre-tenure. And it was a scary thing to do because I had been told by senior faculty, you need to be careful and how many times you move around pre-tenure because you want to show commitment to a university, right? But I think for me, when the University of California at Santa Barbara had a position open, it was really the right move for me because of a number of reasons with the type of research that I do and also family being in the area. So by the time I went up for tenure, it was, or actually by the time I earned tenure, it was at the end of my seventh year instead of, you tend to think of the sixth year. So I think for me, it was really that finally, that feeling of, oh, this felt like a very long journey and I'm finally here. So that was, of course, a sense of relief. So I'll stop there because I know a lot of the other panelists probably have really wonderful stories to share as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I can share next and start off with a confession that I do not have tenure. Which when Roma asked, I said, "Are you sure you want me on this panel?" My school, not necessarily Hopkins as a university, but the Bloomberg School, we don't tenure until full professor. So while I've been an associate professor for, gosh, maybe 5 to 6 years now, um, I'm currently in the process of going up for full. So I guess I can offer some experience that way. Before I started at Hopkins, I started here in 2015. I was at San Diego State University, hi Lourdes and Nehama. And I think as kind of Jennifer was indicating, the process at different universities is just so different. At Hopkins, it's actually a very humane process, I find, in which we're required to provide very few materials, our CV, personal statement, and that's basically it. At San Diego State, I don't know if maybe in Nehama, if you have experience from your visiting role there. When I was there, I recall we had to fill up this big box with like documentation of everything on our CV. So it was a lot of time spent searching for, oh, where was that, acceptance letter for that article, or thank you for serving on this committee, or all of these like little tiny things. Um, but yeah, it's I think, going to depend entirely on the university. And one of the most important things is seeking clarity on what the guidelines are. So I'll stop there, let others chime in.
Hi. So yeah, I actually don't know the tenure procedure here. I'm gonna be heading back to Haifa afterwards. But I can speak for Israel at least, or the university that I'm in Haifa. So I began the tenure track. I graduated in 2010, did a 2-year postdoc in Florida, and then it, you go through all the job process, and I began the tenure track job in Haifa in 2012. And there's the official guidelines of what you need, and then there's like the unofficial like interpretation of those guidelines. And so it was really helpful to get mentoring from my department, especially at the mid-tenure review. So you would sit with someone, they would have a look at your CV and they would be like, okay, that's fine, that's fine. You need more of this. So it's helpful because it's a really critical point at which you still have time to pivot a little bit and to readjust the allocation of your time. So it really is dependent both on the institution and also on your department. So I'm very lucky to have, amazing colleagues who once they bring you into the department, they really want you to succeed. You're expected obviously to do the work, but the guidance at least is there internally. So I got tenure in 2017, and I got the news actually at ICA in Prague. So that was a good moment.
Either CJ or Jeff, if you want to add.
Jeff, would you mind? Yeah, okay. Roma, can I use my PowerPoint slide? Can I share my screen?
Yes, I think you should be able to.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. Can you guys see my screen here? Slideshow.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, so as you can see here, I spent 3 years as an assistant professor at Ohio State University, and then I moved to University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and stayed there for 2 years. And after 2 years of serving as an assistant professor at UIUC, I got the offer from Seoul National University. And before formally accepting that offer, the department chair at UIUC actually gave me a chance to go for early tenure, but I really wanted to come back to South Korea. So I started again as an assistant professor at Seoul National University, and then start from assistant, and then promoted to associate. And then again, after 5 years, I finally got full professorship back in 2021. So it took a lot of time. And as Jennifer mentioned, I moved along a lot of institutions. So it took so much time. And so when I got the tenure, I feel like it's finally such a sense of relief. Okay, so let me stop here. Okay.
Maybe I'll dive in briefly. There's been a lot of great insights, and I share many of the same feelings and experiences. I'll just say a couple of things maybe unique to my circumstance. I mean, I think I got my PhD in 2006 and did a 2-year postdoc, which was tremendous for me personally and like unwinding a bit from the rigors of getting a PhD. Of course, all of that unwinding wound right back up starting in 2008 when I started my faculty position. And I started at the same time as my partner. We were very cognizant of being on the same journey and having the same milestones and being evaluated by the same people at the same times, which I think added a layer of stress to the whole enterprise. I mean, there's really only two possible outcomes that are acceptable when you're going up for tenure at the same time as your partner. You either both get tenure or you both don't get tenure. Luckily, we both got tenure in 2014. On the normal timeline, I would say we were supported by a wonderful department that made expectations clear and was very good, I think, at recognizing different forms of scholarly contribution. Two other things I'll say is we made the choice after, like, pretty much right after the third year review to have a kid. There's a direct causal relationship there, I think, between like the timing. And then we had our second child right pretty much around the time, a little bit before, I guess, of getting tenure. Actually, no, right after, I think within a month of getting tenure. So all of this, what was it like to get tenure is kind of confounded a bit by the fact that we had two very young children in our household. Maybe the last thing I'll say you asked, what did it feel like to finally achieve tenure? I'll be honest that like there wasn't some immediate relief but I did notice almost 6 months exactly after, just like one afternoon, I was like, oh my God, I feel like I don't have this weight on my shoulders that I had just been carrying with me for like the previous 6 years. And it took, I think, a full 6 months to achieve that feeling. So all of this to say, like, uh, for me, it was not some immediate relief. It was a gradual, again, unwinding that took some time.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's lovely to hear all the different array of experiences, whether tenure involves moving from one university to another, moving to another country and starting again, trying to balance, yeah, like because you have an academic life, but we all have a huge other parts of our identity outside of the academy, and how do you juggle that? Um, I was struck by a word, Jeff, that you use, which is a nice segue, I guess, to our next question. You use the word unwinding, because even the PhD program, I remember like yeah, I had to it took a while to just deal with like or like come out of the stress of a PhD program. And I can only imagine, especially, if you've had to make cross-university moves, cross-country moves, deal with family situations. I guess, what is the unwinding, or is there an unwinding process after tenure? And yeah, I guess did you have that? What does that look like? Is there like a second where you pause, or like like suddenly 6 months later, you're like, yeah, something momentous happened in my life. So I'm just curious about that, that aftermath, I guess, of achieving tenure. And again, it's a question for anyone.
Maybe I'll just quickly jump in to say, to, one of the things that kind of kept us going through tenure was sabbatical, the thought of sabbatical, this magical, mystical thing. And we made the decision, because our kids were young, we could do this, to go about as far away as one could go. So we went to Melbourne, Australia. And I will say that like it was chaos. I mean, we had a 5-month-old when we got there, but it wasn't like this incredibly productive time either, but somehow two things happen. One, just like being 14 hours time difference, people just at some point forgot we existed, and it was humbling in its own way, but also amazing because nobody asked me for anything for that period of time. And that was such an important thing, to just have that time. And then second, just like figuring out a new place for 6 months is such a different mindset that it really kind of forced, in a way, a shift, and it felt meaningful, like there was some kind of space between what we had done before and what we were coming back to do. So not all institutions offer sabbatical, and I recognize the immense privilege that I get from having had that experience, but oh my goodness, was it amazing. I might not have said that in the moment, but in retrospect, the greatest possible thing could have done.
Other ways in which people they kind of created that distinction between, okay, that was pre-tenure life, now it's post-tenure life, and some kind of indication of that separation between those two lives.
So, the way that our institution works, that I think may be different from maybe other panelists, is that we, faculty members, are almost entirely self-funded on soft money, usually ranging from, let's say, like 70 to 80% of your effort you're covering through externally funded research. And so I liked hearing Jeff talk about unwinding. And the thought that popped into my head was, I don't know if I'm ever going to be there, because I think, like I'm trained in communication. So it's a model that I'm very familiar with. And tenure always seemed like there's a certain level of security. You can maybe take more risks with your research, or, kind of explore ideas more deeply because you're not as focused on publish, publish, publish all of the time. So yeah, that's something that I kind of was curious about because although tenure does provide stability in the sense that you have a position, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can kind of relinquish all of the scramble to keep funding yourself and your work, and still kind of expect to have the salary that you've been using to support yourself and your family. So yeah, I don't know if others are from places similar to that, or if it truly does kind of offer that maybe mental unwinding, or maybe winding up, but winding up in a different way than what you've been working on.
Yeah, I want to add further to what you were saying, Megan, that other countries, like in Israel, there's an extra promotion jump. So I think the reaching tenure, like the race isn't over. You're not associate yet. You're just tenured, which is like senior lecturer, which doesn't exist in most places. So in that sense, like the pressure is still on. I think possibly until like full professor. So like I'm not quite there yet, but so there's like that extra push. But I will say that like after tenure, I think for about a year, like looking back, I think it was some form of like mental burnout. Like I was fully functional, but like there's like a mental tiredness. Like, just the idea of starting a new project and, and doing more of the same. There is like, it's like the Newtonian law of like action and reaction. I don't think you can do that kind of like intense effort over so many years and not have some kind of an effect. But it's not necessarily bad. I think it's okay. Like you get through it and then like you find a new project and you plan a sabbatical, which as Jeff was saying is a fantastic privilege. And it takes a while to plan, so it gives you like a project to work on. And then being in another country is a great way to like reset as well.
I guess Jennifer or CJ, if you have other insights or different ways you approach that time.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I have some similar experiences where I don't think I experienced as much of an unwinding because what I learned quickly was that the service load becomes the service expectations are quite large, I think, once you are tenured. And so I think for me, I was tenured and immediately became graduate director in our department. And so there really wasn't a chance. And at my institution, we can go up for full pretty quickly, like in 4 or 5 years. And so to achieve that, there's still that kind of emphasis on publishing quite a bit, and still being lead author on publications. And so, yeah, I think it was just kind of go, go, go again. So, but yeah, some of the types of work that I was doing was changing, definitely, like the service roles. Chul-joo, you want to add?
Okay. Can I share my screen again?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. So I want to briefly mention the two unexpected changes on my post-tenure life. As you can see, number one, I was really surprised how many service requests I received immediately after getting tenure. So the overall service demand in Asian university tend to be really high. And so it became really important and quite difficult to do a good time management. That's one thing. And the second one was when I was a junior faculty member and I was younger, I never imagined how hard it is to raise a child and maintain peace in my family. I mean, I'm a dual career couple. My wife is a marketing professor in the US. So my wife and I are long distance couple between USA and South Korea. And so it was really hard. And my priority changes quite as I grow older. I mean, previously career success was my number one priority, but now family is number one priority now. So it's really hard. And so next, let me briefly mention a few psychological shifts before tenure and after tenure. So before tenure, my mindset was try to become a really productive workhorse in my department. But now I want to pursue my long-term research agendas. And second, I always thought about how can I survive in academia, but now my mindset changes. Like I'm thinking almost always, how do I want to be remembered in academia? And third, I used to follow the rules and traditions as a good department citizen. Now I'm thinking about how to become a good leader in my department, in academia, and so on and so forth. And before getting tenure, I just quietly live within an ivory tower. But in South Korea, I want to show my worth as a communication scholar in solving real world problems. So let me stop here. Okay.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It sounds like yeah, a definite shift in like how you approach the first part of your career and then making that transition to post tenure. I guess yeah, several of you have already kind of hinted at things that you did differently after you got tenure, like whether it's like whether you wanted to assume a leadership position or it's thrust on you, like you said, Jennifer, you become graduate program director. Um, or Megan, you said you can't really, well, Hopkins does it differently, but you still have to kind of chase grants because that's where the salary comes from. Um, but something that CJ said in your slide, I was really touched by that. Like the first part of your career, you think about surviving. Now you're thinking about how you want to be remembered. And I wondered, other people, like you had that philosophical, or was there this philosophical shift? Like, okay, how am I going to approach my career now? Despite like, maybe you can't really take a huge breath because you still have to get full professor, like Nehama, you said, Jennifer, you said that. But is there some kind of subtle philosophical shift, psychological shift that occurs?
I I mean, at some point you become the old guy. And I'm there at this point. That is nobody thinks of themselves as like the senior faculty member, but all of a sudden there it is. So that's, I think, just an adjustment in a way. Um, I'll just comment briefly on the service. I mean, it's absolutely true that you get protected from service by and large as a junior faculty member, and you're expected to take on different kinds of service as an associate or full professor. Um, I guess what I would say is I tried to, and the advice I would give sort of related to this is I tried to explore different kinds of service roles to find ones that brought me joy and didn't bring me despair. And that is not a constant thing either. So, for a while I was an associate editor for a journal, and that was wonderful and fulfilling for a period of time. And then every time I got a new manuscript, my initial gut reaction was, ugh, I gotta like ask people to review this. And I decided at that point, like, this is not bringing me joy, and I don't need to sort of spend my time doing this. I can do other kinds of service things. I took on a bunch of I was their director of graduate studies. For instance, I co-directed a center for a period. And I don't know, I found myself really enjoying university administrative roles. And a lot of people hate them. A lot of people, it's the worst thing in the world that they could imagine. And maybe I'm just wired in a weird way, but I really love the roles I'm in now. I'm a senior associate dean in a school. We're building an institution within an institution. And it gives me a new perspective on all of the complicated things that university leaders have to navigate. It's easy to just be the faculty member who says it's all crap and you're doing it all wrong. It's much harder to like have to actually um, think about the complexities and the process of institutional change. So I think for me, it was important to explore possible futures and then recalibrate which ones were energy suckers and which ones were energy providers, I guess. Maybe the last thing I'll say is the stuff that no one sees is the kind of field level service. And, I think everyone in this room does a ton of it. I got asked and did 1 year, 11 tenure or full promotion dossier reviews. And I have to say it about broke me. Like it's just too much volume to do. And so that on top of like journal reviews and all this stuff. So at some point you just can't do it all and you have to say, sorry, I don't have that capacity to do that. And I say no to a lot of those kinds of things now. They're really important and I'll do a fixed number in a year. But I had to figure out what that number was and calibrate and then stick to my guns, right? And say, like, no, I've already said yes to 5 of these. Five's my number. I'm not doing any more this summer, despite the fact that it's centrally critically important. Because the truth is, like, somebody else can do it. And 5 is, I think, enough of a service contribution. You shouldn't do 0, but I don't think you should do 15 either. So anyway, that was a rambling response, but I do think it's very, very real, this increase in asks.
Meghan, I was going to say something, but did you want to go first? You should. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I really appreciate what Jeff said. So much of it resonated with me because I think I have very similar experiences. And I want to touch upon the first comment that he made about, we're kind of now we are the senior, faculty. And that was a huge shift for me where I feel like, as a junior faculty member or an assistant professor, there is this like expectation for the full professors to advocate for you or you see issues going on, you expect them, they are in positions of power and they should be hopefully making some of these changes, systemic changes that you see that are needed. And there's a lot of like the full professors, they're doing these things that are marginalizing or something like that. And then now you become tenured and it's like you are one of those people. And then when you become a full professor. And so I think that's been my shift, is trying to really reflect on how am I in a power position and how do I really advocate for early career folks, whether they're assistant professors or no associate professors. So there's a lot for me of, trying to in faculty meetings advocate, or if I hear things like, even if we have new faculty, it's welcoming the new faculty, inviting them out for lunch, inviting them over for dinner. That is my job now, right? To make sure that they're feeling welcomed in the department, and hearing what their concerns are and trying to talk to the chair, and trying to see if we can make some changes. And something that I had heard too was just this lack of mentoring at the university level or in the division. And so kind of going along with what Jeff said, choosing service roles that you really hopefully can find fulfillment from. And so I ended up working on, developing like a mentoring program for new faculty at the division level or the college level. And now I'm currently working on one for the whole campus. So that's something that's been really fulfilling for me. And it's been a response to hearing, right, these concerns from early career faculty. So that's just, an example, but I'll, of course, I know Meghan was going to say something too, so I'll put it up for her.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I was going to say is very aligned with that. For me, one of the shifts that I've really enjoyed has been the increasing role of training in my day-to-day, which of course for all of us, right? We're educators. It's always something that's very important. But I think, as you're trying to get prepared to go up for associate, a lot of the focus is on like what's your contribution? How many first authored pieces have you done? How many solo authored pieces have you done? And so then having that, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a burden, but having that focus kind of move more towards how are you training your students? How are you using the resources that you've worked to, develop over your time with us to further their training, their careers? How are you training your postdocs? How are you mentoring and working with junior faculty? Has really been nice. And so it's kind of a move away from maybe like the first author role to more of like a senior author role. So you're working with folks as they lead the papers and providing support and guidance has really been valuable. And I will say one of the nice things about our tenure process is that that is kind of built in that there's an expectation that as you move forward in your career, you will have fewer first author pieces and more senior authored pieces. And the school really values seeing your trainees kind of, highlighted as the first and second authors of your papers. So that to me is something that I've really, really enjoyed and has been a definite shift.
Wonderful. Yeah, I just again really appreciate the range of responses. I just wanted to echo or like an underline what several of you said. So if there is going to be this inevitable requirement to take on more service, why not, yeah, look for service that sparks joy. Maybe the academic version of Marie Kondo, like look for things that spark joy in your life. Also really lovely to hear about, yeah, realizing that the things that give you satisfaction, the first part of your career may not be the same second part of your career. So, Jennifer, you're talking about mentorship, Meghan as well, talking about being kind of shepherding in the young scholars and like kind of showing them like how do you lead a paper. But I also really, really liked what you said, Jeff. Thank you for being so vulnerable and candid. Like, yeah, like you cannot review 15 to 20 RPT kind of portfolios because it's going to kill everyone. So just learning how to kind of set that clear boundary, because I know at least my experience, other people's experience in the tenure track, you feel hesitant to say no because you are in that phase of your career. You have to say yes, you have to prove yourself that kind of always kind of driving towards that goal. So like learning to set boundaries and say no. I also wonder, and I think CJ, you kind of mentioned this in your slide, or at least my interpretation of what you said, like after tenure, being able to do projects that maybe like research projects, teaching or service, that maybe are maybe more community oriented, or I think even Jeff, you talked about this, like, yeah, like, not outside the academy, kind of thinking about like broader impact. And so I wonder, after tenure, was there, yeah, just space and time and resources for creative or non-traditional academic endeavors, however you define that? And if there were, how did you kind of approach that?
So Roma, I was not sure what you meant by non-academic creative opportunities, but my interpretation was what kind of changing roles I could get after getting tenure. So in South Korea, it is really important to do some community service. So when I choose community service, I was really careful and selective because it take away a lot of time and energy that I can devote to my research and teaching. So my strategy was choose the areas where I can make real and substantial contribution as a health communication scholar. So I served as an expert committee member or advisory board member only for Korea Center for Disease Control and Prevention. So I just limit my boundary of community service. And also I did some kind of guest service, guest lecturer or guest speaker or a keynote speaker for public event outside the campus, but only health or science related event so that I can manage my time. So that's my one answer. And the second, I wanted to add some services in my institution. So once I became associate professor, I served as a graduate studies director for 3 years. And right after I got full professorship, I served as a department chair for 2 years. And now I'm a director of huge government funding, which provide funding support to graduate students, which involves a lot of service time. And now I became a board member of Seoul National University Faculty Council. So what I'm saying here is a lot of services. This is a lot of services. So as our career progresses, it's getting really hard and very difficult to maintain my time between service, teaching, and research. So I think we should be really careful and strike a balance between those three different aspects of our faculty life. Okay, let
Yeah,
me
no,
stop.
I definitely appreciate that. If I could just clarify, yeah, because the word creative, non-traditional can be interpreted in so many different ways. I was just thinking, when you're on the tenure track, and again, depends on your institution, it's very, very clear like what particular types of products are acceptable, what kind of like benchmarks you have to hit. But sometimes certain types of products can take a long time to produce. It might be very beneficial for the community, especially when we talk about health communication, but maybe the academy doesn't see it that way. So, for example, one of the most my work is in health, like all of you. A lot of my work is in mental health and stigma. One of the most beautiful pieces of research I've ever read was a community-based participatory research project in out of Canada, where the final product was actually a play that researchers and the participants performed to kind of educate healthcare professionals on what patient-centered communication in the context of mental health looks like. But that project probably took like, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years, and I'm not sure. I don't know at what particular career stage the head researcher did that in. So I guess I was thinking creative, like really, really creative, like maybe a musical performance, or especially since we now live in this world of interdisciplinary team science where yeah, again, innovation comes from the mixing of disciplines. And I wondered if any of you had a project like that, where like, okay, I'm going to wait till I get tenure and then I'm going to do this.
Um, yeah, I think so. After I got tenure, like when in academia, there's this idea that maybe the grass is greener, like in the corporate world. And so I was approached to do consulting by a startup company, and like I didn't do a lot of it. It was alongside my other academic and not instead of. But it gave me like a glimpse into like the counterfactual career, and it was something that you should not do before you get tenure, I think, because it doesn't lead to the kind of deliverables that you can put on your CV and immediately, like these are long-term things. But I think it was a good experience as far as like enriching academic skills that like are more long-term investment. So I would like it's a difficult thing when people come and they say, "Oh, I've been approached by this company, that company," and the question is always like, "What stage are you?" Because these are things that you can consider maybe later on in your career. And that's probably the same for these other kind of long-term projects. Like, for example, I was on a consortium for gender equity, which pre-tenure would have maybe looked like a diversion from what I usually do, but it was a topic that's important to me. So I could do that post-tenure with less concern about like the coherence of that relative to other things that I do. So.
I guess I'll add and say, I mean, I don't know if I was necessarily taking on more creative projects, but I would say more volunteering. So I think pre-tenure, I always was in the community. I mean, much of my work pre-tenure was going into middle schools and high schools and doing interview and survey research with immigrant youth and trying to present my findings to the, whether it's school counselors or teachers. So I was already doing some of that. But post tenure, I think it's really investing in volunteer work that doesn't necessarily result in publications, and so it might be volunteering with even like my university's undocumented student services, going to all their events, going to their graduation ceremony and, giving out roses to students, doing a lot of stuff that just isn't, yeah, going to lead to a journal article, but that's why it's also so fulfilling, I think. I've created recently worked with a nonprofit organization to create opportunities for our students, bridging them with the nonprofit and doing a lot of work with immigrant communities, which the nonprofit focuses on. So kind of creating almost like internships for our undergraduate students with these nonprofits that I manage. But again, they're not really coming, there's no publication coming from it. But I think that that's important to find, as we were saying, other ways to gain fulfillment where you feel like you're contributing rather than only focusing on the publications, right? That they probably won't see, the community probably won't see. So that's it.
Um, Something else, again, I think that some of you have kind of alluded to, but we haven't kind of delved deep into it. Um, So, a lot of you have talked about the expectations from assistant to associate, like on the tenure track, like, what are the deliverables? Like, there's a particular timeline as well. Like, um, I think when we began this conversation, like Jennifer, you were saying, like, because of the moves, like maybe you went up in the seventh year, maybe instead of the sixth year, or like, but there's a very particular timeline for like getting tenure. Um, Now that, you've achieved tenure, those of you who are like associate professors and you're in institutions where, yeah, the next step is to kind of achieve full professor. Um, it seems like the deliverables for achieving full professor vary widely. Depends on the institution, depends on your department. And I guess, so how do you begin that journey? Like, do you sit down with someone and they give you like a piece of paper and you have this checklist just because the tenure or something, like, it's pretty clear, or it should be pretty clear, like what you're supposed to do. So is it the same process? Is it different? How do you navigate that?
So at our institution, the guidelines for both going up for associate and going up for full are fairly like ambiguous. They use the term national recognition for like associate and international recognition, internationally recognized like scholarship for full. But what that means is different for every single individual. And so faculty at our institution are given a lot of leverage to kind of define their niche area of research. Because, you have people like me, communication scholar, and then people who are, they've like working with like mouse models and curing malaria and things like that. And what that means in terms of your, even just like the number of publications is going to vary. That said, we happen to have very like formalized review processes, which involve like an annual review by a departmental committee in which your CV is reviewed and discussed, and then feedback is given to you by the chair of that committee. For every single faculty member, tenure track or non-tenure track, all the way up until they are a full professor with tenure. A faculty mentor, both internal to the department and external to the department. So that's three kind of sources of feedback right there. I would say that if there's any ambiguity on what it takes to get tenure, to seek out that feedback by meeting with, whether it's like the chair of the committee at your school or your departmental chair, or if you have access to like your dean or like a vice dean of faculty, to really seek clarity because it's going to be different for every person. I have colleagues elsewhere who work in places where it's a little bit more formalized, where you need two solo authored pieces in a flagship comm journal. You need a minimum of two R01 grants before you could even be considered. And so maybe that's there for you, and then that's like an easy checkbox to kind of align yourself with. But my sense is that there's a lot, I think it might have been Jennifer who was saying this, the kind of like unsaid or informal guidance that really can only come through by talking to people and getting as much input as you can from different sources, right? Like be a scientist about it and triangulate your data.
I agree with everything Megan said, and maybe what I'll add, and this connects to the previous question too, is, at Cornell, it's not that different, frankly, what the criteria are for tenure and then for full. It's still heavily weighted on peer-reviewed publications and all of that. So I didn't feel a whole lot of freedom to just like completely transform what my body of scholarship, creative, non-creative activities were, because I wanted to earn full professor, and I wanted to do it on the standard timeline. Cornell is a place that has, I think, reasonable tenure standards and pretty high standards for full. They really don't like to put people up early. Maybe that'll change in the future. I don't know, but it's not a pro forma thing. It's not something they use for retentions, for instance. And so it is, I think, an expectation of continuing, some of the stuff that I think Meghan and Nehama mentioned earlier. There's additional value of, senior authorship. And that was something that took me a while to sort of learn how that all works and how to signal that, and how, not all social science disciplines have that idea. And health, we have, a lot of interdisciplinary collaborations. And so figuring out ways to like describe the work and the roles, I think was important there. But you know, I think my advice, I guess, related to this is if you go straight to tenure and then decide like, oh, I hated all of that stuff that I did, and I want to do something completely different, that's fine. You have the protection institutionally to do that. But I think you're unlikely at that point to sort of continue to be promoted because the same general sets of criteria are applied. Last thing I'll say is I think like there's a next generation of scholars. I like to think of myself as one of those who is trying to institutionally shift toward emphasis that centers engagement and other metrics of impact. But it's academic institutions are slow to change. So maybe I'll leave it there.
One thing I'll just mention in some countries, when you go out for tenure or for any promotion, including full professor, the tenure and promotions committee that will meet will include people from like law, mathematics, physics. So you can have people eventually hearing your case who have no idea how your field works, what your journals mean, what you do. So what's important, I think, is to create a CV that is coherent as far as like your primary lines of research and your contributions, because it just makes it easier then for the person representing you at the end to explain to a non-native audience why you meet, the required guidelines, especially, for example, if your case is considered against departments that have different, guidelines. So, for example, psychology, in which to get a postdoc, I've been on committees in which postdoc applications had 17 publications, which is just, it's going to skew the way people look at other fields. So it really is dependent on who's presenting your case and whether or not they can like not sell your CV, but explain your CV to people who maybe give it 15 minutes of consideration, and it's a decision that will impact, your life. So that's something, again, if you find a good mentor, we have an amazing dean in our faculty. And so she's done a great job doing that kind of work with people ahead of promotion and then representing them almost like a barrister in court and helping them get through that process.
I think I would, I guess, add and just say, like at my institution, University of California in Santa Barbara, we are fortunate because we do get to look at redacted letters. And so I have read my own, letters that I received. And also I probably read about 30 letters just because of other colleagues, going up for review. And of course, then I receive case materials from others when I'm writing, evaluation letters for cases for promotion to full. And so what I would say is, at least the advice that I give or associate professors is, when you're writing that personal statement to send, give to external letter writers and you have your sample publications, at least for our institution, we are still looking for, those samples to show your intellectual leadership. Yes, we want to see some mentoring, but we still want those samples to show you as maybe several of them to be first author. And so we still want to see your identity, and then also the personal statement. Sometimes I see people, they'll really expand upon their whole career, their achievements. And I think you are creating a narrative to help the external reviewers write their letters. And so I think for my advice is focus. Yes, it's okay to put down what you've been doing, what your identity is, but really focus on like, what have you done post tenure? What have you achieved? Because that's what, at least in my experience, the letter writers for my case, some of them were like, I'm going to ignore these two sample publications that were provided to me because Dr. Cam, published them pre-tenure. I'm only going to focus on what Dr. Cam, achieved post-tenure. And I saw actually a number of letters doing that. So I would say try to really focus on what you've accomplished afterwards. And that's kind of one of the main evaluations. Also, I'd say when we look at the letters, the external reviewers' letters, there's really only a paragraph for teaching and mentoring, one paragraph for service that I usually only see if they even write about service. So what I think one of our colleagues already said, the focus really is on the research, and what you're contributing theoretically, methodologically, and practically. So that's at least what I've observed here.
I know some of you mentioned a particular number of years. I think, Jennifer, you said maybe at UCSB you can go up to fall after 4 years after getting tenure. Is that right?
Yes. Mhm.
And then,
Yeah.
Jeff, you mentioned a standard timeline. How long is that?
6 years for each rank, essentially. So 5 years, end of your fifth year, beginning of your sixth year, you put in your dossier. And then, a standard timeline would be 11th/12th year for promotion to full.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Something that struck me that all of you kind of said, like maybe directly or indirectly. So Meghan, you talked about like, how talking to people, making sure to understand what are the expectations. Jennifer, you used the word mentorship as well, because it's interesting. Very often when we start the tenure track, there is a lot of, people will find mentors for you or kind of, set up these formal mentorship agreements or lots of opportunities either through your own university, professional organizations, or like getting junior faculty, early career faculty mentors. And it seems like after you get tenure, because it's this understanding that, well, you've won the prize or you understand how the game works, like there isn't that much talk about formal mentorship or systems of mentorship post tenure. And so I wonder what is all of your approach to kind of finding those people to still help you navigate this path in your journey?
Can I mention a few things
Right.
about mentorship? I think mentorship is really important, especially because I'm working in South Korea. I mean, as you guys already recognize, South Korea is not the center of academia. But because my hometown is South Korea, I decided to come back. But I want to be visible in academia still, even in South Korea. And so when I navigate the academia, I really need mentors who can give me up-to-date advice about how to survive, how to stay afloat. And my next door, the room next to me is Eunju Lee's office, the former ICA president. So I knock on her door, and whenever I have some issues, I talk to her, and I got a lot of advice from her, doing my JUC co-editor in chief job, and so on and so forth. So when our career progresses, we keep encountering new challenges, and whenever we encounter those challenges, we really need reliable and trustworthy mentors. So, but we do not have formal mentoring system, but I keep trying to find those mentors.
I mean, I'll just echo, and I say this in two capacities. I didn't have one assigned to me, and I'm Senior Associate Dean for Faculty Development, and we don't yet also have a process for our faculty to formally assign mentors to associate professors. That said, I think it's at every level, I have found it is really important to have not just one mentor, but a set of people, and maybe they wouldn't call themselves formal mentors, but I would think of it in those terms, of people that you can seek advice from and learn about their trajectory. So I made a concerted effort, when I got back from sabbatical, as I was imagining possible futures, to reach out to people who had approached, associate and full professor life in different ways, to just kind of learn about their journeys and their advice. And it was, like they were fun conversations too. I tried to do some of these at ICA, you'd like buy someone a beer and just sit down with them, like people who you admire and respect, and just kind of learning about their insights and journeys was super, super important to me, and remains important. Like even in a leadership role now, I have mentors that are at higher levels of leadership to help figure out how to navigate some of the complexities associated with those kinds of roles. So, but I don't know of a lot of institutions that formalize this at the associate level, but maybe you all have good examples.
I don't think I can probably add that much because it's pretty similar. I mean, I'm right now, I think I mentioned I'm working on a campus-wide faculty mentoring program right now, and we are inviting, it's mostly focused on assistant professors, but we are welcoming associate professors to participate. And so, we will be pairing them with, or actually creating like a committee of mentors, mentors in the department and outside. So we'll see hopefully that will help. But yeah, like Jeff and Chul-joo, what they said, there historically has not been that kind of formal system here at my institution. So I think what everyone else said, it's really talking to a variety of people. I encourage, talking to numerous faculty members in your department, but also in the field who will know what maybe external letter writers are looking for in your particular area of emphasis is really good.
I mean, I think the efforts to formalize it are so valuable because my sense, and maybe this was my own experience, is that so you're an assistant professor or junior faculty, and it's expected that you don't quite know the ropes yet and you need the mentorship. And then now all of a sudden you're associate. And you're like, all right, I'm at the big kids table, at the grown-up table. I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. And maybe you do, but probably there's a lot of things that you are not as familiar with because it's a new role for you. Um, so my sense is that, like don't feel like you need to know it all. As Jeff was saying, like he's like, like the man, right? Like you're higher level, working in like administration, like senior scholar in the field, and you have mentorship, right? So yeah, I think that you should just reach out. And people are nice. I mean, like I look at the people that I know here and like I can't see a single face that wouldn't willingly meet with, an associate professor to talk about their experience at ICA this spring. Like people are just so kind and so willing to give, that I don't think that folks should be shy if they do want to reach out for, advice or mentorship.
Great. So, there may not be like formal systems of mentorship, but I'm curious if there are other types of kind of support or resources that your institutions provided or that you took advantage of, um, kind of post tenure. Like, Jeff, you've used this word which I really like kind of exploring your career, trying to see, okay, what forms of service stick, what forms of service make you happy. And I think you could apply that same principles to any other part of like, research or teaching. But I wonder if there were, you know, kind of things at your institution or maybe things in professional organizations that you were like, yeah, well, I can use this resource, or maybe someone said, why don't you use this as a way to kind of explore next steps? Good question for anyone.
Well, maybe I'll put a plug in for formal leadership training opportunities. I've done two versions of this, one organized by Cornell and one organized by the postdoc, but it was several years postdoc. And they were both like pretty substantial investments of time. The one that Cornell did was like a week long. And you might be thinking, oh my gosh, like I could think of all the things I could do in a week besides that. But I have to say, like, transformative in a sense, just you're all going to have leadership roles, whether it's managing students or a research lab or director of graduate studies. Here, a lot of former current directors of graduate studies, editing journals, all sorts of stuff. Like these are all leadership positions. And I had never really had any formal training in leadership. You're all just kind of faking it, and you have your advisors and folks, and that I had an amazing set of mentors and advisors, but like that's not training, that's just mimicry. And so I did this a couple of times. I have to say it came with it a couple of coaching sessions which were amazing. Diet therapy maybe to combined with like um, some really time focused on reflecting on what brings you joy and what you want your future life to look like, your current life to look like. So all this to say, I found those tremendously worthwhile. I'm probably due for a refresher at this point. It's been a while since I've done that. So if your institution does that sort of thing, or there's other external opportunities to do it, I think that's some of the most valuable experience I've had as a professional.
I just want to say, I'm glad you mentioned coaching. That's something the institution I'm at also offers, and it could be you can kind of tailor the coaching to whatever you need. Yeah, but also appreciate the point about leadership kind of training opportunities because you're right. Like there is that service expectation. We're not necessarily trained in how to do that as part of the PhD, so it's nice that the organization provides that. Yeah, I'm just curious if others, if you, maybe in other countries, if there are, CJ is like, no, 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 categorical, no, yeah. But like, I don't know, maybe resources that were always there, but you didn't realize, like, oh, maybe I can use this resource in a different way, or I can brainstorm an idea, or like just another kind of innovative way to approach it. But yeah. All right. We're kind of getting towards the end of our time. Before I kind of open it up to the audience for questions, all of you, just by virtue of sharing your experiences, have kind of indicated things to do, things to not do. But I guess, if like someone invited you out for coffee or tea or yeah, beer at ICA or wherever and asked you for like they've just achieved tenure and they are like, okay, now yeah, now what do I do? Or do you have advice for me on how to like navigate this next step? I guess what are maybe top two or top three things you would say to them?
I think I would ask them what they like to do and like what did they enjoy relative, if they could pull out their CV and like highlight like three publications they were particularly like proud of or students, projects that they were really, motivated by, and then try to understand with them what is it about those things that inspired them and motivated them, and then maybe see what would the next iteration of that kind of thing look like for them. And on the converse, like if there are things that they don't like to do, maybe how can they move gently away from those areas and reposition like their time, I think.
I think I would add, and it's kind of similar to what we've already been saying, but I would really encourage associate professors to find, as we said, service that they can enjoy. And really, it's okay to say no to service invitations. I really want to emphasize that because I find that sometimes associate professors are taking on so much, and it's like I myself have this is probably not good to admit, but I'm not interested in being an editor or a journal editor or an associate editor. I've turned down those invitations because it's just not, yeah, Chul-joo, I'm looking at you. No, I'm just kidding. It's just not something I want to do. And so I have, chosen to be like, I was the health comm division chair for NCA, and that was kind of my way of, contributing to the discipline. So again, it's okay, and there are ways that you can still be promoted to full without having to do certain things. So.
So I think it is really important to find your own strength. So for some reason, I really enjoying editing a journal. So I was an associate editor for JUC for 4 years. And after that, I became a co-editor-in-chief, which I really enjoy. I don't know. I understand how you feel, Jeff and Jennifer, how you guys are really frustrated or waste of time. But I don't know. I mean, I think that's my strength. So I focus on editing a journal, which is kind of one strong aspect of myself in terms of career development. So my advice is try to find your own strength area.
Yeah, to be clear, CJ, not a waste of time. I'm very grateful that you're in that role. It's amazing and you're great at it. And if it brings you joy and fulfillment, that's an amazing thing. I mean, I agree with what everyone said about like do things that bring you joy and fulfillment and try to, you're not going to have a full 100% everything I do brings me joy and fulfillment. It's never going to happen. Like no job provides that. No life provides that. But trying to know what you're good at and what you like and where you want to be challenged and trying to optimize as much as possible for those things. And I guess related to that, Chul-joo mentioned this at the beginning, like it's easy to get into a like grind out tasks and finish a bunch of stuff. Like you're sort of incentivized to do that on the assistant professor track. You just like do, 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 do. And it's not a default state for me to like take a step back and really take time. And it takes time to reflect on what am I good at? What do I want to do? What brings me joy? And I think just building in time, real focused time, like putting it on your calendar even, um, is really, I found at least, really valuable in helping to think through what I like and what I don't like and what I want to do and what I don't want to do and why I want to do it and why I don't, just like know thyself. And it takes time to learn about thyself, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I think all of you have kind of made the same point, but in different eloquent ways. But I just wanted to kind of underline what Jeff said. It's really striking that reflection, which is so absolutely critical to figure out what you did, where you are, where you want to go forward. It's yeah, if you don't build in time for that, whether it's on a daily basis, weekly basis, it just yeah, it doesn't happen, and you lose the rich rewards that come from that. Um, we have about 9 minutes, I guess, left, and we have people who are still awake who haven't left us. And so I just want to, yeah, if folks want to raise their hand or you want to put a question in the chat, we can direct it to our panelists. Yeah, go ahead, Jingbo.
Hi, it was really, good to listen to all the discussions. Actually, I should give the opportunities of questions to others, so I will hold back on my questions. I have a lot of questions, actually. I hope we could have more time for audience question, but I will save my questions. And for the panelists, if I don't get the chance, I will reach out to you to ask questions. Amy, yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me? So thank you so much for all of the panelists. I guess my question is about promotion to full. So I got my tenure around 7 years ago, and ever since then, I've been doing the same kind of work I've been doing. I've been enjoying it, and also I got upgraded to a mom. So it's like I like everything I'm doing. And also, I have some of my colleagues who are really split. That some of them were like, I'm just happy being associate professor for the rest of my life, and others really want to get promoted soon. And again, at Northeastern here, my institution, full professor promotion is not a kind of pro forma thing. So I guess my question is for the panelists who are full professors or on the way to become full professors, that in your experience, so what has been the most fulfilling or meaningful aspect of becoming a full professor beyond the title itself? I mean, of course, you spend less time typing your title. So that's my question.
Do any of the full professors
I
want
feel
to
like
take?
I'm talking too much, but for me, you talked before, Roma, about like feeling real freedom to like be untethered to I have to churn out journal articles. And for me, that didn't happen until full. And I still like publishing journal articles, to be clear. Like I get a lot of fulfillment. I think there's tremendous value to peer review, but I can also take on stuff and with no expectation of a peer-reviewed journal article, and it's okay. And I can say the goal of this is to inform practice or policy or create a two-page report or not be tethered. Churn it out on a faster timeline, frankly, rather than waiting, you know, X amount of months for the peer review process to take its place. So to me, like that didn't really happen until a promotion to full. And that is a wonderful thing, I would say, from a feeling like I truly have academic freedom at this stage.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I had to pause and think about it for a moment too. And I guess for me, it's probably mentorship, the ability to really put my graduate students first, so that even though I'm still designing projects, I mean, they're designing projects that they're leading or designing my own projects, but when I get the data and I do all this, work collecting it, I still try to, right, have my grad students be lead authors on the papers from the data. And my role is to really edit their papers, help write, help guide them. So, and that's extremely fulfilling. So I feel that it's about, yes, first as associate, I still need to be first author on a number of pieces, but there's then a balance that has to come into place where I'm starting to prioritize my grad students. And now as a full professor, I really prioritize them, So yeah, I think that's probably that mentoring of graduate and undergraduate students that keeps me going too.
I don't know if you wanted to add anything, CJ?
I think after being promoted to full, I got my mental health and physical health, and also I could put my family first because being promoted to full professor is kind of homework or my destination. So up until I was fully promoted, and I was always worried about my career, and my priority was career success. But after reaching my goal, my number one priority is my wife and my son. So that was, yeah, the greatest gift that I got after being promoted to full.
Awesome. Sedona, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. I have two questions. I'll also put them in the chat and you can choose which ones you want to answer. One was literally the practical logistics. How do you spend time thinking about big ideas, developing big ideas, researching these sorts of things? What do you do so that because you talk about getting more service requests, how do you set aside time practically and logistically to do that kind of like broader, bigger project sort of thinking work? And the second was sort of like post tenure. I sort of see lots of people go in kind of different directions. Some people go really heavy into research. Some people start doing more community engaged and applied projects. Some people do more service. Some people want to become a dean and do an admin track. Are there any other sort of options or that I'm missing? And sort of how do you know and sort of feel out what you might like to do with the idea that maybe being full professor isn't just the end of your career, you still got a lot of your career to do and a lot more things to explore and try.
I don't know if this will help you, but a lot of it is just serendipitous. Like, at least in my experience, like, for example, a project that I was involved in, pro bono consulting for a surgeon who does colonoscopies. Like, we were just having a conversation in an audience, and that led to a project. And like, and then I met somebody in Brussels at a EU event, and that led to something else. So, uh, I think, yeah, I can't speak for other people, but some of this is deliberative thinking, and some of it is just like moving around and like bumping into interesting people or hearing about an interesting project and just sending your CV and like seeing what happens. And if it happens, great. If you liked it, fantastic. If not, you know you don't like that now. Um, but again, I'm sorry if that's not helpful.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about your first question, and I guess for me, because I am doing when I do work with migrant communities, so those projects, and it's qualitative and quantitative, longitudinal, so it does take several years, my projects. And so I feel like part of it is because I'm working with doctoral students, I'm constantly trying to help them design their study. So I kind of have two tracks of, the graduate students and their projects that I'm working on and helping them push forward. And so those are happening, and those might be a little bit smaller, shorter projects. They're not going to be able to take several years on those necessarily. And then there's my project that I try to, maybe it's every, I'm having it go on for a couple of years, right? And so I'm kind of designing maybe one of my big projects, right? Every once a year, every 2 years. I haven't really thought, taken an assessment of that. But so I kind of have my long-term projects that I'm leading that I know are going to take numerous years, and then my grad students. And so because they're kind of moving at that pace, fortunately, it's been working out where I'm having something every year that's coming to fruition. And I'm kind of trying to have like these just different, I guess, projects at different stages constantly, right? Like something's under review, something that we're working on, writing up for submission, and then something we're designing, like all happening maybe throughout the year. So I don't know, but I guess that's the kind of answer to your first one of, yeah, there's always a big project happening simultaneously. It takes longer.
Yeah, we are at time, unfortunately, a little bit, maybe a minute over time. Yeah, thank you so much. This was an incredible conversation. Um, yeah, I guess someone's asking if folks will be at ICA, and maybe I guess people are making plans to email you and put you on their calendar so that they can ask you more questions, maybe at a conference. Um, I guess I just wanted to end, earlier in the conversation, yeah, several of you talked about, this kind of the rigor of the tenure track, and achieving tenure is like this particular moment that you remember, or at least like, yeah, you maybe 6 months later you realize that something momentous happened. But I wonder, and perhaps this is not a question we could answer now, but maybe a question for a future conversation, whether this model is something that is healthy. Like, should we actually be thinking about a post-tenure moment where suddenly people can breathe again and prioritize their family and realize that they can look at their CV and identify their passion? Because this has been a wonderful conversation, but I also wonder if there is another way to kind of approach academic life. Um, so uh, all right. I wonder if anyone wants to have one final word before we say goodbye.
feel like people are saying those final words in the chat. So
Yes.
it's going
Oh,
on
yes.
great.
I'm just looking at it. All right. Wonderful. Well, I'll let you all get back, I guess, to your days. Thank you again so much for taking the time, and hopefully we'll see each other at a conference or some other serendipitous meeting. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.